Okay, good morning, everyone. And maybe a good evening for others in other parts of the world. Welcome to the webinar, Blockchain Technology for Natural Ingredients and Agricultural Products, organized by CBI. My name is Thomas Vonk, and I'm working for CBI in the Market Intelligence team. First, some remarks about today. We cannot hear or see you, so please ask your questions via the questions tab in the control menu on the right of your screen. We will try to answer all the questions answered today in the webinar. There will be a recording of this session, and that will be shared with you in a few days. At the end, we have a short survey, so please complete it first, and we know what you think of this webinar. Okay, next slide, please. This is the agenda for today. I will start with briefly introducing CBI, and then we have the main presentation from Iveta Kovakova from Ecovia Intelligence. Iveta will do that presentation. I heard today she has some camera issues, so you will not see her and only hear her. And after the presentation of Iveta, we have a guest speaker, Alistair Douglas. He's the founder of Eastmile Technologies, and he will talk today about using blockchain technology in the fish sector. We will finish with questions and answers, so all the questions you have been asking via the question tab will be answered. Okay, next slide. We'll talk what CBI. CBI is it's the Center for Promotion of Import from Developing Countries, and our mission is to support the transition towards inclusive and sustainable economies. We do this by strengthening the sustainability of small and medium-sized enterprises in developing countries. We encourage exports of value-added products to Europe and to the local region. We promote and create decent jobs. We pay special attention to women and youth, and we stimulate sustainable trade and production. We contribute directly to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals number 8, 12, 5, and 17. Next slide. We are currently active in 14 sectors. Many of them are agricultural sectors. Next slide. And we currently can work in these countries, about 37 countries at the moment. In the future, this will be less countries. We will focus more on Africa and less on Central America. CBI core competences are that we organize projects, 4-year projects, and we help SMEs with company coaching in these 4-year projects. We give them trainings, for example, for certification. And also we support the government and business service organizations in creating an export environment for the sector. And we organize for the small and medium-sized enterprises in our projects, we organize market entry activities like visiting trade fairs or exhibited at trade fairs. And last but not least, we offer a broad range of market intelligence studies. You can find these on our website, and these studies offer all kinds of tips that help SMEs realizing their export ambitions to Europe. Next slide. Okay, next. We invite you to go to our website, and maybe at the end, if you have some time, we can visit our website together, and I will show you where you can find the studies. Also, we will publish a study about blockchain in natural ingredients in about a month. And so this is the webinar about that, and the study will be published in about a month on our website. I think now it's time for the main presentation, which Iveta will give.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you for the introduction. So yeah, welcome. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. In my webinar, I will give a presentation on the blockchain technology and its application for the natural ingredients and agricultural product sector. So what's on the agenda today? So first of all, I'll give an introduction to blockchain. Then I'll talk about disadvantages and advantages of this technology. And I'll finish with opportunities for exporters in developing countries and also conclusions and future outlooks. So first of all, I would like to briefly talk about Ecovia Intelligence and the business services that we offer. So we are a market research and consulting company, and we specialize in sustainable products industries. And this is the brief outline of our business services, which includes market and technical research, business and sustainability consulting. We also organize seminars and workshops. And last but not least, our sustainability summits that we hold in major regions all around the world, such as Europe, North and Latin America, and Asia Pacific. We have an upcoming edition of our Sustainable Food Summit coming up in January, which will be held online. However, we are planning to move back to personal events, physical events in 2022. And if you're interested, you can find more information on our summits on our website. So what is blockchain? So let's first start with defining blockchain. So the Merriam-Webster dictionary defines blockchain as digital database that contains information that are simultaneously used and shared with a large, decentralized, publicly accessible network. Other definition of blockchains. There are also other definitions of blockchain. For example, Investopedia defines blockchain as a distributed database that is shared among the nodes of a computer network. So yeah, there's definitely not a unity as to what when it comes to a definition for blockchain. So what types of blockchain there are? A blockchain has evolved into 4 types. Each type has its own advantages and disadvantages, and also its own applications. So first of all, there's a public blockchain, which is non-restrictive and decentralized, distributed ledger system. Anyone can join and verify transactions, and users often don't know each other, and strict security protocols have to be followed. So this type of blockchain is used for cryptocurrency, such as Bitcoin. Then there is private blockchain, which is a closed network, and it uses peer-to-peer connections, and these type of blockchain networks are usually smaller, and users also tend to know each other, and trust is also established. We also have hybrid blockchain, which is a combination of the public and private blockchain networks, and users can control who gets access to which data. And then there is also consortium type of blockchain, which is semi-decentralized type, where more than one organization is in charge of the network. And usually private blockchains and consortium types of blockchains are used in supply chains. So what are the drivers of the blockchain technology? So here are some, which include in ethical consumerism, then growing importance of sustainability initiatives, increasing demand for transparency in supply chains, and availability of technology, whether it's among consumers or stakeholders within the supply chain. So when it comes to ethical consumerism, we know that the awareness of consumers is increasing, and consumers are looking more and more looking at the environmental impact of the products that they buy. And this slide illustrates what generation of shoppers are willing to pay extra for sustainable. See that Gen Z millennials have high share, and we expect the importance of ethical consumerism to increase even further as this generation have more disposable income. So another driver, sustainability initiatives. It has become common for consumer goods companies to make sustainability integral part of their strategy. And we see companies such as Unilever, Danone, Cargill, all making sustainability pledges. And here is an example of Nestle dedicating $3.6 billion to boost sustainability. Transparency in supply chain. So related to this, companies and importers want to cater to consumers. Consumers' need for more transparency. Many areas such as product development, manufacturing and distribution practices tend to remain hidden from consumers, and blockchain presents a solution where corporation can start to bridge the trust deficit that's been created due to various food scares and scandals where the trust was broken. Availability of technology is related to increasing use of digitalization and technology among consumers. It's becoming more important in supply chains. This has been magnified during the COVID-19 pandemic as well. Companies introducing digitalization technology into their overall processes and supply chains, and we expect this to continue. So what are the benefits of blockchain? So there are several, and it also depends on various types of sort of stakeholders across the supply chain. So first of all, transparency and traceability, that's a major benefit. Then its tradability, which is use of blockchain, could improve efficiency in ownership or licensing. The facility of consensus is one of the major benefits of using distributed ledger systems in supply chain management. Then there is security. The adoption of blockchain technology and digitalization of logging and data leads to more consistent data tracking. So requested data can be obtained by accessing the network at any point. We also, another benefit is streamlined operations during the digital, because of the digital nature of the network, processes are streamlined. Another benefit is better pricing or reduced cost. Blockchain provides faster payment options and lower costs for stakeholders, mainly due to smart contracts. And we also see another benefit to be consumer engagement, increased consumer engagement, where data analytics generated by blockchain can be used to enhance consumer satisfaction. And we've seen in the last few years various retailers introducing QR code schemes where consumers can scan QR codes on products, and they can access information about the origin, the provenance of the product. And examples include French retailers such as Auchan and Carrefour, and also Walmart. So as I said, traceability and transparency is obviously the biggest benefit. Blockchain allows process tracking alongside reporting and regulatory compliance. This offers ability to track digital or physical products at any point of their life cycle. So what are the limitations of blockchain? So we hear a lot about the benefits. However, blockchain has a lot of limitations that are sort of hampering its scalability and adoption rate. So here are some examples: high energy consumption, its high cost, lack of policy and regulatory framework, lack of maturity, its immutability, and interoperability. So when it comes to high energy consumption, the technology is very demanding on energy for every transaction made. More energy needs to be spent. However, on the other hand, when it comes to supply chains, usually private networks are used, and they have limited number of nodes. They're not as big, and they do not have these issues. Another limitation is high costs. So this is a significant barrier for exporters in developing countries. Initial cost can be low, but subsequent related cost to maintenance and training and data collection can be a big issue for exporters in developing countries. Lack of policy and regulatory framework is also a huge barrier. The technology is still in its infancy, and although we have seen some legislation on a national and international level introduced in the last few years, it is still not sufficient enough to ensure safety on a larger scales, and this especially pertain to financial services. Immutability. So this is very often seen as a benefit of blockchain. However, the immutability of data on blockchain can cause privacy issues, where, for example, the GDPR policy enables the right to forget, and this is not possible in blockchain, which can potentially create privacy issues for individuals in the future. The immaturity of blockchain is a barrier in and of itself. This technology is only over a decade old, and it still needs to mature in order to become attractive for more stakeholders. And another barrier is lack of interoperability, where blockchain is not compatible with other platforms and systems that use different technical interfaces. So these networks are not able to connect with each other and communicate with each other, and it creates so-called digital island problem. So what are the opportunities for blockchain in supply chains and for exporters of natural ingredients, raw materials in developing countries? So one of the main opportunities for distributed ledger systems is increased trust and transparency in supply chains. So the technology can fight food fraud, and improve consumer trust. This is especially true in case of certified products and raw materials. Another opportunity is international payment transactions. So international trade involves multiple agreements between financial institutions, freight providers, and other stakeholders in the supply chain. And currently, this system can be very inefficient at times, and this has a negative impact on or can have negative impact on cash flow of importers and exporters. And as blockchain utilizes smart contracts to automate the settlement of payments, this presents a solution to this issue. However, this will only be possible if SMEs and stakeholders have significant resources and skills to operate and maintain blockchain. So what is the conclusion or some of the major takeaways? Include this blockchain is a unique opportunity to tackle major problems in raw material supply chain. So the technology has a huge potential. On the other hand, this technology cannot solve everything, and its application is restricted. And also its implementation requires careful planning, consideration, and coordination. And one of the main challenge for exporters is lack of digital skills, infrastructure, and resources. So you have to keep that in mind. So thank you very much for your attention. So that's everything from my side. So now I would like to introduce Mr. Alistair Douglas, who is the CEO of eTrial Technologies, and he will give a case study on his on application of blockchain and their Fishcoin project. Thank you.
Thank you, Iveta. Before going to Alistair, maybe we can just answer one question there is about your part of the presentation. Is that okay?
Yeah.
We have this question. The majority of us are not selling branded products directly to the European Union retailers. How can blockchain help us to reach the end consumer? So
well,
if you're not, what is the link to reaching the end consumer when you're only selling to retailers?
If they're selling only raw materials, right? How can they? What's the benefit for them to use blockchain? Is that what the question is about?
Yes. So how can blockchain help us? Therefore, if you're not not selling to, help us to reach the end consumer.
Yes, I think this definitely comes down to the transparency and increased demand for transparency and traceability in supply chain. So even though they may not be selling finished products, there's a huge demand for traceability for raw materials as well. There's several examples, for example, for vanilla. Also, Alistair will be talking about the fisheries industry, and there are other examples as well where the transparency is in high demand, and it will become more so even in the future. So European buyers are demanding more and more transparency because they want to cater to consumers as well.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I'm going to make Alistair the presenter.
Hello, everyone. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. And you can hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, firstly, thank you for the opportunity to present today. It's a privilege to do so. And thank you for all the time, the people that are on the call, wherever you are. My company is called Each Mile Technologies, and we embarked on a project called the Fishcoin Project. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today. And it is specific, obviously, to the seafood supply chains. And it's about incentivizing data sharing in those supply chains. So without further ado, I will kick off. But also, there are a lot of words in the slides, so please probably don't try to read the slides. If you have any questions afterwards, please find a way to reach out to me at Each Mile. So obviously, the state of the world at the moment is we're approaching a lot of breaking points, and supply chains are at the center of those in terms of the challenges that we face, but also the solutions that we need. And the seafood industry is a rather large industry, and I'll go into that just now. A lot of people aren't aware that the seafood industry is the sixth largest industry in the world, $900 billion a year. 1 in 10 people on the planet derive income in whole or in part from the seafood industry. And in the last 50 years, we've seen seafood consumption double. And one of the unique challenges in the seafood industry is that there aren't just one species like there is with beef, which is Bos taurus. There are over 12,000 species of seafood that we consume. The industry is at breaking point in many respects. There has been some encouraging signs, but 90% of wild stocks are considered to be at maximum exploitation or on the verge of collapse. Up to 60% of the seafood we catch is lost, wasted, or discarded through the seafood supply chains. 80% of seafood can be mislabeled because of the species problem, but also because of fraud. More than 30% of the global catch is considered to be illegal, unreported, unregulated. And this is a horrifying statistic, but the US FDA rejects more than 50% of the seafood that it tests. And it inspects 0.1% of the seafood. And it's really, most of it is risk-based, but there are a lot of problems with regards to food safety and other issues in the seafood supply chain. So there are also a number of broken incentive structures. Farmers or fishers can be paid as little as 5% the retail price. And the middlemen are often the gatekeepers that control information, and they feed into endemic cycles of oversupply and waste. And all this sort of comes at a cost. There's a social, there's an economic, and there's an environmental cost that is often an externality. So going into root causes, why are we failing? The seafood industry and the wild capture side of things is that there's a tragedy of the commons. And it really is about our failure to manage shared resource systems where people have equal and open access to the resource. And really the key to changing this is to start to build trust, to get the data and move to ownership. The fishermen who own the resource are incentivized to protect the resource. So that is very, very important that the fishermen get ownership of the stock in order to manage the resource more sustainably. And we need data for that. We need to be able to identify, verify, and reward legal and responsible production. So at Each Mile, we feel that there's time for disruption, and we've seen platform business models really disrupt the way we order taxis, the way we book hotel rooms. How could platforms disrupt the seafood supply chain? And that was part of the journey that we started But they do have their problems. There are, like I mentioned before, a lot of the IUU seafood, and there's a lot of illegal and fake goods that are on platforms like Amazon and Alibaba. Seafood is a perishable item and has a lot of food safety concerns as well. So it's not the best product for a platform, but we feel that platform disruption can really change the game, because if you're on a platform selling seafood for a commission, it's in your interest to get the best price you can, and therefore it's in your interest to help the fisher or the farmer demonstrate that their products are legal, that they're reported, that they're regulated, that they're safe, that they're authentic, and that they're in compliance to sustainability and responsibility standards and regulations. So we feel that this is the promise. However, traceability is a must. And traceability is extremely important in terms of being able to get data to verify that the fishers are fishing sustainably, legally, get environmental data for sustainability, social data to make sure that the crew and the people that process the seafood are not slaves or are not indentured labor, not child labor. Farm data from fish farms, financial data, supply data, food quality data, food safety data, demand data, and market data. All this data can help the whole supply chain operate far more efficiency. But traceability is the critical data rails, if you like. However, there's a distinct lack of traceability in supply chains. And a study by Standard Chartered Bank found that only 6% of firms have visibility in their supply chains. So with only 6% of companies in the world having some form of visibility in their supply chain, how can they have the data to support their claims of sustainability or responsibility? And, you know, without traceability, without the ability to trace it back to the very first people in the supply chain, you know, it's like the planet is sort of, we're driving the planet off a cliff, because we can't really identify, verify, and reward this responsible production. So traceability is extremely important. And so to bring this sort of platform disruption, we needed to start at the first mile. We needed traceability back to the source. And so therefore, we thought, well, we have to focus on traceability first. And this data that we get from traceability can provide aggregated supply data to buyers on the platform, assure compliance to standards, assess creditworthiness and de-risk for sustainable financing, assess insurance risk, allocate resource ownership, and create powerful brands. So we partnered with the State Department, and we built an application called MFish, or we took over the application, to be honest and fair. It was started by a company called Tone, but we evolved it into an application that was 2G, that was free for access and free for use. It was on the Facebook's free, it still is on the Facebook's free basics platform. And it's multilingual, has a logbook, has best practices, and we thought this would be a great start, but it wasn't, because we made it free. But at the end of the day, what was the incentive for fishers to share their data, or fish farmers to share their data? In fact, the other thing you have to think about is, what are the disincentives for sharing data? If they share data and governments see that data and they see that fish stocks are falling, they will restrict access to the fish stocks. They will take away licenses, permits, or reduce the number of days that fishermen can fish. So you have to always think about the disincentives as well. But the incentive was something we had to work on. So enter blockchain. Obviously, we've talked about that. Evita talked about it, how it's an immutable distributed ledger technology. It can store data, but it's not a database. It can build trust, but it can also be something that can enter erroneous data as well. It can be a transfer of value, and it can represent fractional ownership. And it can be an incentive for sharing data. And so we started the Fishcoin project and we built an application. We built it originally on the Ethereum network, but the speed of transactions and the cost of transactions were prohibitive. It is now on the Stellar blockchain, where it can do thousands of transactions a second for a fraction of a cent and very low energy cost because it uses what's known as quorum slices, the consensus mechanism. Tokens can be bought by buyers of the seafood and exchanged for the data, not for the fish. It's not a currency for fish, it's purely a currency for data. So how much that data is worth, the market needs to determine. It's a negotiation between the seller and the buyer, and the data value is related to the value of the fish being sold. Developing nation actors thus get rewarded for sharing their data, and developed nation actors meet regulatory and buyer requirements by having traceability on a blockchain system. The tokens can be redeemed for mobile top-ups, and in the future we're hoping for fiat currency or other vouchers. We're actually building out the other vouchers now so that you can actually pay your electricity bills with the vouchers, or the tokens, I should say, the Fishcoin tokens. You can pay for water bills, you can redeem them for, in the United States right now, you can redeem them for Walmart vouchers or Starbucks. You can even go to Starbucks and get vouchers from there. So not that it's important really for developed nations, it really is about developing nations where 95% of our seafood comes from. Some of the examples where we're working right now is black tiger shrimp. The farm black tiger shrimp industry relies on broodstock, wild older female prawns that are harvested in Aceh in this case. The eggs go into a hatchery, they form post-larvae or juvenile prawns that be transferred to farms, into ponds, and they grow out from there. And so we are tracing it from the fishery to the hatcheries, to the farms, and then through the supply chain. And this is an example of what we've been doing with a company called Atina in collaboration with the Asian Seafood Improvement Collaborative and the Grand Hyatt. I don't know if you have time or you can scan that QR code, but you'll be able to see the full story of a shipment of product that went from the farms all the way through to the Grand Hyatt and all the actors involved. We also work with developed nation fisheries to developed nation markets. You can actually get blockchain traceability for 0.01 fish coins, which is the equivalent of 1 US cent. So we've made it demonstrated it that we can make it extremely cheap and easy to use. And this was a Western king prawn fisher in southern Australia, again into the Grand Hyatt in Singapore. We have another project underway in collaboration with the United Nations Development Programs, Archipelagic and Island States Forum, and it's using Fishcoin tokens to incentivize the tagging and the release of fish to get data on the stock. That's a tool that's used by fishery scientists to assess stock size. We have a Medium blog, if you're aware of that, for Fishcoin and both Each Mile, and recently posted some of the work and the progress in that research project, where you see the fishermen getting trained in how to tag fish, all the way through to, and the Each Mile Fishcoin application, all the way through to tagging fish at sea and releasing them. And it was born from that fish on the bottom left-hand side. I was on a vessel in Lombok. I asked the captain how much he would get for that fish, and it was 1,000 rupiah, Indonesian rupiah, which was about 6.9 US cents. So if we could give that fisherman 15 US cents worth of Fishcoin and ask him to tag that fish, hopefully that would be the incentive. We're working out what the incentive would be right now. And then he releases that fish. Another fisherman captures that fish. It's a little bit bigger, records the data. We send him Fishcoin tokens, and we send the first fisherman Fishcoin tokens again. And then a third fisherman might capture it. It's larger, it's got more value for the market, and then he can sell it He gets Fishcoin tokens for the traceability data. The second fisherman and the first fisherman can also be rewarded again. So it's a method to incentivize fishermen to work together to keep fish in the water, to get data on who they are, what they're catching, what the stock status looks like, the abundance and diversity and information, and get them eventually ownership and access rights to the fisheries. It's really, really important to do that for the artisanal and small scale fishers of the world. So that's one project that's we're quite excited about. Another project is a Consortium Project right now. It's been submitted, it's been supported by the European Space Agency, and it's in with the UK Space Agency at the moment. It's about putting sensors on fishing nets to gather oceanographic related data as they catch fish. And that has a unique digital fingerprint that we can put on the blockchain, but then we can actually ask buyers to use Fishcoin tokens to pay for not only the traceability data, but access to a climate smart fishing logo, because they're supporting climate change research. And so and we can also use that money to pay for the sensors and the systems that the fishermen need. So often we keep asking the fishermen to pay for systems and pay for traceability systems. This is a way to get the market to pay for the data that shows that they are compliant, and for traceability data that the market is demanding. Fishermen do not have a return on investment when they invest in these technologies unless the market is paying for it. We have made the code open source. So we are not about selling an application. Our application is free to use, free to access. We're also open source code. And we are supporting the Fish Hackathon, which is the largest environmental hackathon in the world. In 2018, it was in 35 countries, 44 cities. We want to enable the technologically inclined son of a fisher or daughter of a fish farmer to be able to build an application around our open source protocol for their local communities. And we will split the commissions that we make with them for that. The Fish Hackathon is a platform for us to engage with them. And we are launching that at the World Ocean Summit in December of this year. And we're landing it at the global sort of event at Lisbon from March 1 to 3. Smart Farm Initiative is an initiative that helps to get data from farms, put sensors on farms, and then put the data on a blockchain. Allow the sensor owners and the farm owners, the asset owners, to be rewarded for sharing their data that can help feed integrators, the companies that make feed, and the feed ingredient suppliers that supply those feed integrators, to get information back from the farms on the performance of the feed and the performance of the ingredients. It also helps the farmers to farm better, to produce better quality fish in a least cost environment, and that is environmentally sustainable. So it's putting the farmers at the center of the world, if you like, in the fish farms, and getting data and helping the people that provide the services to be rewarded rather than having to sell their services to the farmer. Okay, maybe I went through that a little bit too quickly. I guess I'll stop here. I took some notes earlier on as well. I just wanted to mention this, that is, seafood and fish is not only food, it is feed. A lot of fish get ground up into fish meal and fish oil. Now, the fish oil is used as part of an ingredient for feed for animals and the fish protein, but it's also goes into omega-3 capsules, for example, that we consume as health supplements. So the sustainability of the seafood industry is not just about the fish as a fillet that we eat directly, but it's also a feed and an ingredient. And therefore, sustainability and responsibility must extend back to the ingredients as well as the actual product that you're consuming. Transparency. I gave a talk recently about transparency. We have to be careful about using that word. There is not enough data often to support claims. When you look at a fishery that is certified sustainable, it needs to have data on the target species. It needs to have data on all the other species that it is catching. It needs to have data on the habitat and its impacts on the habitat. It's very, very rare that you will have data on all of that sufficient enough to say that you are operating sustainably. Then there is the responsibility aspect to it. So when you say transparency, you have to be very careful about what you're asking, because it's a huge amount of data that is required to meet compliance to those standards that we simply do not have. It's an improvement process, so we have to be very careful about that. Blockchain, yes, can be high energy, but Bitcoin is not blockchain. And yes, there is high costs, but there are more and more people coming into this space and costs are coming down. Also, there is an interesting initiative called the BSN, the Blockchain Services Network in China. China will not allow fully decentralized blockchains to get into the, to operate inside their country, but they will support fully decentralized blockchains in terms of interoperability. And they're funding that. They're helping to fund that in developing nations through the Blockchain Services Network by bringing down the cost to build blockchain applications by a factor of 10. So that's another thing. I think someone mentioned about the end consumer and where you sit. It's very, very important that you have traceability that people can trust. So the blockchain, in many respects, is a testimony to your truth. The fact that it is immutable means that you can't change the data. So if you're an ingredients supplier and you sell to a company, get blockchain traceability, because it means that your testimony to the truth that can build trust through the supply chain all the way through to that end consumer. All right, I'll stop there. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Alistair. That was a very interesting story. We have some questions, and if there are people in the audience who want to ask new questions, please do. I think one of the questions that interests me as well is there a similar Fishcoin blockchain application for the spices industry, which with traceability from grower from grower through to processing and through to the end consumer? So this is like maybe or is there a similar project, or can similar project be started for natural ingredients like spices, but also essential oils?
Yes, it can be started, and it should be started. The trace protocol is behind Fishcoin, and we are currently reskinning that for palm coin. We've been asked to do it for cocoa, and we've been asked to do it for vanilla. So our team is currently doing that as well for these other commodities, so that we can deploy them through these supply chains, because they have similar problems. We built M Pharma. It was funded by Unilever to engage primarily with palm oil farmers because they have similar challenges as to fishers. So short answer, yes, but there isn't anyone out there that is tackling it this way. The reality is that the business model of traceability is terrible. Who pays what, when, where, how in a supply chain, who owns the data is a real problem. So there is a lack of whole chain solutions. And there are the matters of data protection, data sovereignty, and then access and permissions to data. It controls and owns and can monetize. And blockchain can really help with that as well, because the people that share the data can be recognized and rewarded upon monetization. So blockchain can really help us out of that sort of impasse, if you like. But the other thing about blockchain is that we can give them ownership of the business that they put their data into. We're very excited about being able to help fishermen and fish farmers be shareholders in the business of traceability, and also the trading platforms that they sell their fish on. And that's truly inclusive business models that can be created in and around blockchain technologies.
Great. So the example of the vanilla you just mentioned, then that is with the incentive for giving your data as well. There's an incentive.
Yeah, we've been asked to do that. We've been to Madagascar, and we've also been asked to do it recently in Papua New Guinea. Great.
Okay. There's a question you just mentioned the data and putting in your data. There's a question here: blockchain can prevent changing data along the supply chain, but could it prevent and detect false data entry by every stakeholder on his level of the added value?
Yes, it can. I mean, for example, in the prawn or shrimp farms that we showed earlier, when a fish farmer onboards, he identifies where his farm is or where his ponds are, and using, say, Google Maps, we can go in and find those ponds, and we can polygraph them, and we can look at the area of the ponds. And from that, we can come up with a sort of a maximum production level based on averages. And from that, we can triangulate the veracity of the data. So we can look at a production cycle, we can look at the proportion of small, medium, large size prawns. And if he produces something way above average, that can trigger an alert. If a fisherman has a 1-ton canoe, he's not going to catch 2 tons of fish. So there are ways to triangulate the data to assess its veracity and trigger alerts that basically ask for a clarification or provide that fisher or farmer with a strike and say, look, you're obviously something's gone wrong here. The other thing about the buyer of the seafood buying the tokens to power the blockchain and reward the fisher for sharing that data or the farmer for sharing that data is that if you're buying it, you're not going to buy for erroneous data. You won't accept data that's wrong, that's gone onto a blockchain, that can be proven to be wrong. And so it's in your interest, so the fisher and the buyer, or the fish farmer and the buyer, are checking the data to make sure it's accurate. There can be errors, of course, as long as they report those errors. But yeah, blockchain is like anything, it's garbage in, garbage out. So yeah, it's just a case of why would you do it with a blockchain?
But the fact that everybody it's transparent and everybody can see all the changes in the value chain, in the data, makes it more reliable.
Well, yeah, it does, but it doesn't. I mean, the public blockchains, you have to know the identity of the wallet holder, for example, in a blockchain. Who holds? You can see the movement of the transactions, but if you don't know who the two actors are, then you don't really have full transparency. However, this is a problem in some respects, that people just don't want that transparency. There are commercial sensitivities in and around that data. There are other sensitivities in and around that data as well. So there's a move towards privacy preserving transactions as well, zero knowledge proof. So and look, the other thing really is digital identities and the importance of a digital identity, but also the digital dignity side of it as well, and preserving that. So there's a move towards these approaches to preserve the privacy of the transaction as well, so it's not fully public. What we've done with Fishcoin is, and we're building out now, is an inheritance chain to allow the fisher or the farmer to choose who he shares his data with, or she shares her data with. That's important. So having control over the access and permissions further down the chain.
Okay, thank you. There's another question about the costs, maybe. If blockchain is so expensive, are there alternatives for suppliers in developing countries that are less expensive or easier to implement?
Yeah, so blockchain can be expensive to build a solution. I mentioned before, Blockchain Services Network, BSN, is trying to subsidize that. The blockchain that we have running on the Stellar blockchain at the moment costs a fraction of a cent per transaction, and it can be done in thousands in a second. So there are blockchains that are available that can reduce the cost and speed of your transactions and not be that expensive to build either. So now there's this perception that blockchain is very expensive, very power hungry. Like I said, the Stellar blockchain uses quorum slices and to rapidly achieve consensus, rather than having to use every node on the network reach consensus, which slows it down, which uses a lot of energy and adds a lot of cost. And really, at the end of the day, the security, if there is little incentive to hack that system, you do not need to have massive amounts of security as well.
Okay, thank you. There's a question, I'm going to read it. Which blockchain platform is most suitable for developing traceability solutions? Maybe a broad question, but
yeah, we have a partnership with Cardano. We're working on Cardano as well. We built originally on the Ethereum network. It really is a horses for courses sort of question. What are you trying to do with it? What's the supply chain look like? How much data? How important is security, et cetera, et cetera. So you really have to think about what's the value of the data, what's the cost, the speeds, those sorts of things that you need, and then make an assessment there. But we are blockchain agnostic. We don't choose or push any one operating system over another. Our trace protocol can be built onto any blockchain operating system.
Okay, thank you. We have one more question, and I'm going to give my own translation of the question a bit. And I think the question is because is it harder to implement blockchain in developing countries, in African countries, where data collection for agriculture producers is more a challenge?
Good question. It depends on the sort of data that what sort of data are you needing? Do the actors further down the supply chain need? For us, our system is built to operate on the basic key data elements for traceability as required by the EU traceability law or as required by the Seafood Import Monitoring Program of the United States. There are buyer requirements as well. So if the buyers are demanding more data than the minimum, then it can be a challenge. And the key is to minimize the data as much as you can down to what you need, I think. And yes, connectivity is a challenge in developing nations. You need a smartphone to operate a decentralized application. When we built the mFish browser application, we stripped out of the JavaScript and put it on it's basically operable on a 2G network. However, the transition from 2G to 3G to 4G to even 5G is going to happen much faster than when we skipped. A lot of places are skipping 3G and move from 2G to 4G. So yeah, it does depend on the device. It depends on the connectivity and the costs of those, as well as the sort of data that you're collecting, the volume of data, and the need for the velocity of movement of data. So again, it comes back down to horses for courses. If you've got a specific question, please reach out and I'll try and help answer it. Let me know what you're trying to build, for what industry, what country, and then maybe we can try and help you with an answer.
Okay, that's great. I want to do this last question that just came up, and it's who do you think will be the prime initiative takers in developing transparency blockchains in agriculture? Is it the supermarkets, the governments, the sector associations, NGOs, or others?
Yeah, I think transparency, like I said, is tough. If you ask people would they like transparency in their own lives, most of them would say no, for a range of reasons. But if you have a competitive advantage, then you can be and possibly should be transparent, because if you have full compliance to a standard from a legal, from an environmental and a social perspective, then you should be as transparent as possible. But you need a lot of data for that. Governments also don't like too much transparency. We have covert funding and covert operations for a reason. And then there are industry that don't trust government. So you have to understand that too. Fishers often don't, because of corruption, don't often trust their own governments. And that's not just in developing nations. The other thing is that they don't want to pay tax. Most companies don't want to pay tax. Most companies now are clamping up because of plausible deniability issues. If you know there's a problem in your supply chain and you do nothing about it, then you lose plausible deniability. Then the question of liability comes in. So if you talk to people in supply chains and procurement and businesses, then when you ask for transparency, don't expect a really happy response, because the amount of data that you need to demonstrate compliance is massive. It is truly huge. One trawl in Thailand has brought up 200 different species of fish. Do you know if every one of those species is sustainable? You don't. Look, and then there's the habitat impact. And you have to know that every time. So it's extremely data intensive, and we just don't have that data. It's a continual improvement process. Don't expect to switch the light on like that. It's a dimmer switch, and you need to slowly start building up the data. That's the one bit of advice I'll give you on the use of the word transparency.
Okay, thank you, Alistair. Great. We will be closing this webinar soon, but I will show a bit more on our website and how to find. Alistair, I know you have other priorities as well.
Thanks very much.
So
Thank you, Thomas.
Please, you're free to leave. We're just going through our website where they can find the studies and more information, and then we'll close it. But thank you, Alistair.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Vida. Thank you, Marguerite. And thank you to CIB for the opportunity. And thank you for everyone that stayed online and for your time. I do appreciate it. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer. And good luck building solutions. The world needs these sorts of solutions. Don't get discouraged by what I just said. It's needed more now than ever.
Yes.
So we'll help you, support you as best as we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Okay, good day. I have just shared my screen with you, and I'm just wanted to show you a bit more on the website of CBI, and then we will close this presentation. This is our website, and you will find our market information studies here. We have here all the 4 sectors. So, for example, we go today to natural ingredients for health products. And you will find the sector studies on the demand and trends. You'll find tips studies for tips on buyers, tips to do business, organize your export. Soon there will be tips to how to go digital. There will be, and in under sector studies, we will soon publish within a month the study on the blockchain technology in natural ingredients. So what you've seen today, presented by Iveta, will be in a study on our website soon. Also, we have for each sector the product studies on specific products. So how to export these kind of products, for example, moringa, essential oils, how to export them to Europe. And so if we go to the moringa study, you will see here we have the market potential study for moringa and the market entry study. Okay, and that's it for today. I want to all thank you for joining us today, and we will send you the link to this recording and probably also the presentations that you've seen today. Thank you. Thank you, Iveta, for your presentation as well.
Thank you.